Dad perfect events. On my son's wedding day, 200 guests watched my future in-law point a finger at me and laugh. He called me a burden. He called me human trash. He thought I was just a broke old mechanic in a cheap suit who was lucky to be breathing the same air as him. My son's fiancée stood there in her $30,000 dress and smiled while her father destroyed me. But when I walked out, I wasn't walking away in shame. I was walking away to make a phone call that would sink his company like a ship with no anchor. My name is Ben Carter. I'm 56 years old, and this is how I taught my son that the man fixing the engine often owns the whole fleet. Let me back up a bit. For the past 15 years, I've been living what most people would call a double life. Every morning at 5 a.m., I put on my work boots and head down to the harbor. I've got grease under my fingernails, calluses on my hands, and I smell like diesel fuel most days. The guys at the dock know me as Ben the mechanic, the guy who can fix any engine that's giving trouble. They see me in my coveralls, working on tugboats and cargo ships, and they figure I make maybe $50,000 a year if I'm lucky. What they don't know is that I own every ship that comes through that harbor. Carter Maritime Holdings has been my life's work. Started it 25 years ago with one rusty cargo ship and a dream. Now we've got 47 vessels in our fleet, 800 employees, and contracts with every major construction company on the East Coast. We move everything from steel beams to concrete mix, from lumber to heavy machinery. If you're building something taller than 3 stories in this city, chances are your materials came through my docks. But nobody knows that. Not even my son Ted. Ted's 32 now, works as a bridge engineer for the county. Good kid, makes honest money, lives in a decent apartment downtown. He thinks his old man fixes boat engines for a living because that's what I let him think. I wanted him to make his own way in the world, to have confidence that came from his own achievements, not from riding on daddy's coattails. The thing is, when you're worth $200 million, but you dress like you make $40,000, people treat you exactly like you make $40,000. And that's how I learned the truth about Max Foster. Max owns Foster Development Corporation. Third-generation money, inherited a construction empire from his grandfather. His company puts up those glass towers downtown, builds shopping centers in the suburbs, develops luxury condos by the waterfront. Max drives a $150,000 Mercedes, wears suits that cost more than most people's rent, and lives in a mansion that could house a small village. For the past 3 years, Foster Development has been one of my biggest customers. Every month, Max's company orders millions of dollars worth of construction materials through Carter Maritime. Steel from South Korea, marble from Italy, specialty glass from Germany. It all comes through my ships, through my docks, under my supervision. But Max Foster has never met Ben Carter, the CEO. He's only met Ben Carter, the mechanic. The first time I encountered Max was 2 years ago. One of his project managers was complaining about a delayed shipment, and Max himself came down to the docks to see what the holdup was. I was working on the engine of the crane that unloads the containers, wearing my grease-stained coveralls and a baseball cap. Max walked up to me like I was part of the machinery. "You," he said, snapping his fingers. "Where's the harbor master? I need to speak to someone in charge." I wiped my hands on a rag and looked up at him. "What can I help you with, sir?" He looked me up and down like I was something he'd stepped in. "I don't need help from a mechanic. I need to speak to management. This delay is costing me money." I could have told him right then that I was management, that the delay was because his company was 6 weeks behind on their payments, and we were holding their cargo until the check cleared. Instead, I pointed toward the office building. "You'll want to talk to the front desk," I said. "They'll get you sorted out." Max shook his head in disgust. Typical. Can't get a straight answer from the help. That's when I knew exactly what kind of man Max Foster was. 6 months later, Ted started dating Kate Foster, Max's daughter. Ted was smitten from day one. Kate's beautiful, I'll give her that. Blonde hair, perfect smile, looks like she stepped out of a magazine. She's got expensive tastes and never worked a day in her life. But Ted saw past all that. He saw someone he thought he could love. When Ted told me he was serious about Kate, I did what any father would do. I started paying attention. I watched how Kate treated the waitress when they went out to dinner. I noticed how she talked about people who didn't have money. I saw how she reacted when Ted mentioned his dad worked with boats for a living. And slowly, I started to understand that Kate Foster was exactly like her father. But Ted was in love. And love makes smart people do stupid things. The engagement happened fast. Ted proposed after 8 months of dating, bought her a $15,000 ring that took him 2 years to save for. Kate said yes, but I noticed she didn't seem excited about the ring itself. She seemed excited about what it represented, her ticket into what she thought was Ted's future success. The wedding planning started immediately. Kate wanted everything perfect, everything expensive, everything designed to show the world how well she was marrying. The Grand Harbor Yacht Club was booked for the reception, the most expensive caterer in the city, a $30,000 wedding dress that Kate insisted was just adequate for the occasion, and through it all, I kept fixing engines and saying nothing. The first real warning sign came 3 months before the wedding. Ted invited me to dinner at Kate's family home, their mansion up on Hillcrest Drive. The place was everything you'd expect from old money: marble floors, crystal, chandeliers, oil paintings that probably cost more than most people's houses. Max answered the door wearing a smoking jacket like he thought he was in some 1950s movie. He looked me up and down, taking in my khakis and polo shirt, and I could see the disappointment in his eyes. "You must be Ted's father," he said, like he was identifying something unpleasant. "I'm Maxwell Foster. Please, come in." The dinner was painful from the start. Kate's mother, Margaret, kept asking me about my little boat repair business in a voice that suggested she was talking to a child. Max wanted to know if I had plans for expansion and seemed amused when I said I was happy with things the way they were. "Contentment," Max said, cutting his steak with surgical precision, "is the enemy of progress, Ben. A man should always be striving for more." I almost laughed. Max Foster lecturing me about striving for more while he sat in a house his grandfather built, running a company his father handed him. But the moment that really got to me was when Kate started talking about the wedding arrangements. "Daddy's been so generous," she said, reaching over to squeeze Max's hand. "He's paying for the entire reception. We're expecting about 200 guests." "That's very kind of you, Max," Ted said. "I wish we could contribute more," but Max held up a hand. "Nonsense, son. This is Kate's day. She deserves the best." He looked at me across the table. "Besides, I understand your family's situation. Blue-collar families often struggle with events of this caliber." The way he said blue-collar families made it sound like a disease. "We'll make sure Ben here feels comfortable," Max continued. "We're planning a seating arrangement that puts everyone with their appropriate social circles." I felt Ted tense up beside me. My son knew what was coming. "What exactly does that mean?" Ted asked. Kate jumped in quickly. "Oh, it's just practical, honey. We're putting the business associates and family friends at the main tables, and the, working folks at tables near the service area. That way, everyone's comfortable." "The service area," I repeated. Max nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly, near the kitchen doors. Your father will be much more at ease with people from similar backgrounds. The conversation will flow better." I looked at my son. Ted's face was red, and I could see him struggling between defending me and avoiding a fight with his fiancée. "Dad's not just working folks," Ted said quietly. "He's my father. He should be at the family table." Max's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. "Ted, I appreciate your loyalty, but we need to be realistic about these things. Your father works with his hands. Our guests are CEOs, lawyers, politicians. What would they talk about? Maybe they'd learn something," Ted shot back. The tension at that table was thick enough to cut with a knife. Kate was looking back and forth between Ted and her father like she was watching a tennis match. Margaret just kept eating her salad like nothing was happening. Max leaned back in his chair. "Son, let me give you some advice. In life, there are leaders and followers, makers and takers. Your father is, well, he's a good man, I'm sure, but he's chosen a simple life. You, on the other hand, have potential. You're marrying into a family that can open doors for you. Don't let misplaced sentiment hold you back." That's when I spoke up. "Max, what doors are you planning to open for Ted?" Max seemed surprised that I'd addressed him directly. "Well, there are opportunities in the construction industry, management positions. Ted has the education, the potential, with the right connections." "You mean working for Foster Development?" "Possibly, if he proves himself worthy." I nodded slowly. "And what would Ted have to prove, exactly?" Max's smile got wider. that he understands how the world works, that he can make the hard choices successful men make, that he won't let emotional attachments interfere with good business sense. The message was clear. Ted could have a future with the Foster family, but only if he was willing to distance himself from his blue-collar father. We left shortly after that. Ted was quiet during the drive home, staring out the window of my old truck. "Dad," he finally said, "I'm sorry about that. They're not usually so honest," I said. Ted looked at me. "You're not angry?" "Son, I've been dealing with men like Max Foster my whole life. They judge a book by its cover and miss all the important chapters. But the seating arrangement at the wedding?" "Don't worry about it," I told him. "Sometimes it's better to let people show you who they really are." What Ted didn't know was that I'd already started making plans. The next morning, I called Vince Morgan, my attorney, and asked him to pull the payment records for Foster Development. What he found was interesting. Max's company owed Carter Maritime $2.8 million in shipping fees, and they'd been consistently late on payments for the past 6 months. According to our contracts, we had the right to demand immediate payment if the account went more than 90 days past due. Foster Development was currently 127 days behind. The next few weeks were interesting. While Ted stressed about tuxedo fittings and flower arrangements, I quietly started calling in some favors. 25 years in the shipping business teaches you a lot about leverage, and Max Foster was about to get an education. The first thing I did was review every contract Foster Development had with Carter Maritime. Vince Morgan and I spent hours going through the paperwork, looking for every clause, every penalty, every legal hook we could use. What we found was better than I'd hoped. Not only was Max's company behind on payments, but they had also violated several delivery terms. 3 shipments in the past 4 months had been refused by Foster Development because they arrived inconveniently, meaning Max's project managers weren't ready to receive them. According to our contracts, refused deliveries resulted in storage fees of $10,000 per day until the materials were accepted. Foster Development now owed us $3.4 million, including penalties and storage fees. But that was just the beginning. I started making quiet inquiries through my network of shipping contacts. Turns out, Max had been having cash flow problems for almost a year. His company had overextended itself on 3 major projects, betting that luxury condo sales would stay strong. When the market softened, Foster Development found itself holding millions of dollars worth of unsold inventory and hefty construction loans. Max Foster wasn't the financial genius he pretended to be. He was a third-generation rich kid who'd inherited a successful company and slowly run it into the ground through poor planning and expensive tastes. The wedding was still 2 weeks away when I decided to apply some pressure. I had Vince send a formal notice to Foster Development, demanding immediate payment of all outstanding debts. The letter was polite but clear. Pay within 30 days or face legal action and immediate termination of all shipping contracts. Max called Ted that same afternoon, furious. "Your father's company is trying to shake us down," Max told Ted over the phone. I was sitting in Ted's apartment when the call came in, and Max was loud enough that I could hear every word. "What are you talking about?" Ted asked. "Some outfit called Carter Maritime is claiming we owe them $3.4 million. It's obviously a scam. They're probably targeting us because of the wedding, thinking they can squeeze money out of us." Ted looked at me with confusion. "Dad, do you know anything about Carter Maritime?" I kept my face neutral. "Never heard of them, son." Max continued ranting on the phone. "I'm going to have my lawyers destroy these people. Nobody tries to extort the Foster family. Ted, I want you to stay away from this. These kinds of people prey on working. Families like yours. They probably think they can intimidate your father into pressuring us somehow." After Ted hung up, he turned to me. "Dad, is there any chance you know someone at this Carter Maritime company? Maybe you worked on one of their ships?" "Might have," I said. "Hard to keep track of every company that uses the harbor. Could you ask around? Maybe find out if this is legitimate." I promised Ted I'd look into it. That evening, I called Max Foster directly. I used the phone number from his business cards, the ones he'd handed out at dinner that night like he was doing us a favor. "Foster Development, Maxwell Foster, speaking." "Mr. Foster, this is Ben Carter, Ted's father." There was a pause. "Ben, what can I do for you?" "I heard you got a letter from Carter Maritime about some money you owe them." Max's voice turned cold. That's none of your business, Ben. Well, the thing is, Max, Ted's worried about it. He thinks maybe you're being scammed, and he asked me to look into it. I can handle my own business affairs. I'm sure you can. But I've been working the docks for a long time. I know most of the shipping companies around here. Carter Maritime is legitimate. Another pause, longer this time. You know them? I know them very well. And Max, if they say you owe them $3.4 million, you probably owe them $3.4 million. That's impossible. We've never done that much business with them. You might want to check your records. Carter Maritime handles a lot of the construction material shipments in this harbor: steel, concrete, specialty imports. If you've been building anything in the past 2 years, chances are they moved your materials. I could hear Max shuffling papers on his desk. Even if that's true, Max said, we have standard payment terms, 90 days net. Not when you refuse deliveries, Max. Every time your people turn away a shipment, storage fees start accumulating at $10,000 per day. The line went quiet for a long moment. How do you know all this? Max asked. Like I said, I've been working these docks for a long time. You hear things. Well, if you hear anything else, Ben, you'll let me know, won't you? We're going to be family soon. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. Of course, Max. Family helps family. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and thinking about the wedding that was now just 12 days away. Max Foster thought he was dealing with an extortion attempt from some unknown shipping company. He had no idea he was being stalked by the man he'd been dismissing as a simple boat mechanic. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for him to walk into it. The Grand Harbor Yacht Club was packed that Saturday afternoon. Every table was covered in white linen, every chair filled with people who thought they ruled this city. I sat at table 15, way in the back near the kitchen doors, wearing my only good suit. It was navy blue, bought off the rack at Sears 3 years ago. The fabric was a little shiny under. The lights and the shoulders pulled tight when I moved. My son Ted sat at the head table next to Kate Foster, his bride-to-be. Ted looked nervous up there, tugging at his collar every few minutes. Next to Kate sat her father, Max Foster, wearing a custom tuxedo that probably cost more than I make in a month. At least, that's what he thought I made. The trouble started when Max stood up to give his speech. He tapped his champagne glass with a silver spoon, and the room went quiet. Friends, family, Max began. Today we celebrate the union of my beautiful daughter, Kate, and her dedicated fiancé, Ted. There was polite laughter. Max smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Now, we all know Ted comes from humble beginnings. Very humble. His father Ben works with his hands down at the docks. Max's gaze found me in the back. Blue-collar work is honest work, I suppose. Someone has to fix the boats. Every eye in the room turned toward me. I sat perfectly still, keeping my face neutral. But today isn't about where we come from, Max continued, his voice getting louder. It's about where we're going. And thanks to Kate's influence, Ted is finally moving up in the world. He walked away from the podium, champagne glass in hand, making his way through the tables. He stopped at the lawyer's table, then moved to the banker's. He was working the room like a politician, and he was heading straight for me. You see, when Kate first brought Ted home, I'll admit I was concerned, Max announced. My daughter has always had expensive tastes. She deserves the finer things in life. But Ted, well, he's learning. Max stopped right in front of my table. The spotlight from the stage followed him, putting me in the harsh glare of 200 judgmental stares. The challenge with marrying into a working-class family, Max said, is that you inherit certain obligations. He gestured at me like I was an exhibit in a museum. This is Ben Carter, Ted's father. Look at him, folks. This is what 30 years of manual labor does to a man. Rough hands, cheap suit. Probably never been inside a place like this, except to fix the plumbing. A few people chuckled. Not loud laughs, but quiet, polite amusement at my expense. Max leaned down closer to me. Ben here lives in a rental house on the wrong side of town. Drives a truck older than some of the people in this room. But we believe in family, don't we? Even when they're challenging. I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just arrogance. This was cruelty. So, here's what I've decided, Max announced to the room. After Kate and Ted get married, I'm going to help Ben find a better job. Maybe something in our mailroom. We believe in lifting people up, don't we, folks? The applause was scattered but polite. Max straightened up, looking pleased with himself. He thought he'd just demonstrated his generosity while putting me in my place. I stood up slowly. My chair scraped against the floor, the sound echoing in the suddenly quiet room. "Max," I said. My voice was calm, steady. "Thank you for the offer?" Max smiled wider. He thought he'd won. "But I'll have to pass," I continued. "You see, I already have a job." I pulled out my wallet and placed a business card on the white tablecloth. Benjamin Carter, President and CEO, Carter Maritime Holdings. The smile faded from Max's face. He picked up the card, read it, then looked at me with confusion. "Carter Maritime," I said. "We own the harbor where your construction materials come in. Every shipment, every container, every piece of imported steel for your buildings. It all comes through our docks." The room was dead silent now. Max was staring at the card like it might bite him. "In fact," I continued, "I believe Foster Development currently owes us $3.4 million in shipping fees and storage penalties. Your company's been having some cash flow issues lately." Max's face was turning red. This is impossible. You're a mechanic." "I do fix engines." I nodded. "It's a hobby, keeps my hands busy. But my real job is running the largest independent shipping operation on the East Coast." I looked around the room at all those faces that had been smiling at Max's jokes a minute ago. "I came here today hoping to welcome Kate into our family. Instead, you decided to turn my son's wedding into your personal comedy show." I picked up my business card and put it back in my wallet. "Ted," I called out to my son. "You got a choice to make, son." Ted stood up from the head table. Kate grabbed his arm, whispering urgently, but he shook his head and walked down to my table. "Dad, I'm sorry. I should have stopped him. You got nothing to be sorry for. But you need to decide if you want to marry into a family that thinks it's entertaining to humiliate people for sport." Ted looked at Kate, then at Max, who was standing there like a man who'd just been hit by lightning. "Kate," Ted called out, "I love you, but I can't marry someone who thinks it's okay to destroy my father for entertainment." Ted walked over to Kate and placed his engagement ring on the head table. "I'm sorry, Kate. I thought you were different from your father." The room erupted in whispers and gasps. Max looked like he was about to collapse. "You tricked us," Max said weakly. "I never lied about anything," I replied. "You just assume that because I don't wear a Rolex, I must be poor. Your assumptions aren't my responsibility, Max." We walked out together, father and son, leaving the Foster family to explain to 200 guests why their perfect wedding had just turned into a business disaster. 3 months later, Ted met Rebecca Martinez at a coffee shop downtown. Becky runs a youth mentorship program, teaching kids that success comes from character, not from bank accounts. 18 months after the wedding that never happened, Max Foster's construction company finally collapsed under the weight of bad decisions and unpaid debts. I never had to call in lawyers or force a bankruptcy. I just stopped shipping his materials and let economics take its course. As for me, I still live in the same rental house. I still drive the same old truck. And every morning, I still go down to the docks to check on my ships and occasionally fix an engine that needs attention. People ask me why I don't move to a mansion now that everyone knows I can afford it. The truth is, a man's worth isn't measured by his possessions. It's measured by how he treats people, especially people he thinks can't help him. Max Foster learned that lesson too late, but my son learned it just in time. Sometimes the most powerful man in the room is the one everyone thinks has the least power, because he sees who people really are when they think no one important is watching. Never mistake a man's work clothes for his worth, because the person you're looking down on today might be signing your paycheck tomorrow.